Hi, my name is Rachel Poor, and I'm here from the American Society of Agronomy. And I'm curious for all of you if any of you have been working with USAID on these projects.
Okay. Do I see any other hands up? I feel like an auctioneer. I have one more, and then we will come back.
Jess Wilhelm from IFPRI. I wanted to know, what is the tenure system in many of the communities in the Sahel, and how does that hinder or contribute to agroforestry initiatives?
Okay. Why don't I come back to the panelists, because we have several of you, and then we'll come back. Question USAID and question tenure.
USAID, je pourrais utiliser, traiter. Oh, sorry, I'm going to English. USAID. It's an interesting question. USAID played a key role in the early 1980s in natural resource management in the Sahel. Some of you may remember, for instance, a USAID-supported publication which was developed by Asif Sheikh of the International Resources Group, Opportunities for Sustainable Development, listing various cases of success in the Sahel. And I think USAID had a lot of good experts on the ground in those days, some of whom are in this room at this moment. And USAID was constantly trying to influence national policies and to adapt national policies so that they would induce land users to invest in natural resources. So USAID in those days played a key role. Does USAID play a key role at this moment? I think a bit less than... I'm a diplomat, I'm Dutch. I think a little bit less than it was 20 years ago. Somebody is now cutting off, I think, the... But it is very important that what is interesting, there is an Obama administration initiative for global food security. And what we've been emphasizing in different fora in the last week is that it is very important that the USA gets it right. And there is a lot of pressure, I assume, on how the $3.5 billion which will be available are going to be spent. And there may be a few difficulties. Our school of thought is that and that is also shown by Larvanu in his PowerPoint, you first have to manage your natural resources adequately, and then it becomes rational to start using your external inputs. There is a lot of pressure from what I would say the fertilizer lobby all over the world that we should massively inundate Africa with fertilizers. I think that is absolutely the wrong way forward for most of the African farmers. First manage natural resources and then add some of your fertilizers. So, but let's say we put, if the USA gets it right in this initiative, then other countries will also get it right. So American innovation and leadership in this respect is most welcome. It's very urgent that you get it right.
Are there other panelists? Yes.
I just want to contribute and also try and to respond to the second question about the land tenure. In terms of USAID input in all this process, Chris Reij has said that, and if I can talk about the case of Niger, I know these achievements that we get in terms of restoring our environment, USAID play a very important role. There was in the 80s up to mid-90s, USAID funded a project in Niger, and that's Project Troisième in Zinder, and that's the area where we have millions of hectares that have been restored. And I think this USAID-funded project has left a very good impact in the livelihood of Nigerian populations. Now, with regard to the tenure system, I could not get time. I could not get enough time in order to explain how all these systems evolved with time. With regard to the land tenure system, Niger, for example, in the case of Niger, that's I know very, very well, and I can talk with confidence. There was the adoption of a rural code in 1994 that clarified the land tenure system. And the change of policy in 3 tenure, that's what's really the most crucial or important change in environmental policy in our country. Before, tree management or natural management in general are controlled by the states. But as from 2004, this has been changed in terms of tree tenure. If you have a tree in your farm, this tree belongs to you. So trees are owned by the land owners. And that's really what motivated farmers to invest more in terms of tree protection throughout the country. And we really thank God that it's really this policy change is giving a lot of positive impact to the whole nation. Thank you. Thank you.
Edwige?
Sorry, I will speak now in French because it is my native language. Pour ce qui concerne donc l'appui de l'USAID au CILS, le CILS depuis sa création. Le CILS a été accompagné depuis sa création par l'USAID et tous les changements politiques dont j'ai tenté de parler assez rapidement, donc du passage des approches centralisées à la décentralisation qui est actuelle, qui est une réalité maintenant au Sahel. Tout ce processus, nous avons eu l'accompagnement de l'USAID pour influencer les politiques. Donc, voilà.
Yeah, I can just go ahead. Okay. In fact, in short, and what she said, that all what she has presented is really through the support from USAID. USAID, as Chris said, has supported the SEALs in fact, since its creation, establishment, up to just recently. So USAID contributed a lot in the establishment and the implementation of some of the activities that SEALs has carried out. Thank you.
Anything further? Yeah, okay. I have Suresh and then a gentleman behind you and then Steve. And then actually I too have a question.
Thank you, Rajul. Suresh Babu from IFPRI. Thanks for excellent presentation of even more excellent work that you have done on the ground. And we just, a team of people from IFPRI returned from Asia. And when we talk about lessons from Asia to Africa, now we have something to take from Africa to Asia in terms of soil fertility and degradation and so on. So I'm very appreciative of what you have just presented to us. But I want to ask some kind of technical questions in terms of, have you monitored the dynamics of soil fertility? It is not that nitrogen in 1 year or 1 season, because you are planting trees and then that cycle of nitrogen. What has happened to the nitrogen buildup if there is a buildup? Is there monitoring of that? Related to that is the soil structure. Has it improved? What is the humus content of soil, for example? And how that is fundamental for you to even think about applying chemical fertilizer. And what is the state of that in these villages? And that's something that I want to learn from. But also there is the polarization of chemical fertilizer versus organic manure. That's been going on forever, and that has in some Asian countries taken people to just say no chemical fertilizer. We are going organic all the way because of the negative impacts of green revolution, and that's also is affecting food security in Asia. So you might want to think about it and what is the optimal level of mixture. And you already showed that graph, but let's not send the wrong message that, and everybody goes organic once again, and you have to pull them back in convincing them to use chemical fertilizer. But finally, what exactly the yield increase from this technique?
Okay, thank you. Let's just pass the mic behind you. Do you mind? Please take notes, panelists.
Keith Fugley from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. The trend that you've identified, been talking about, this re-greening of the Sahel zone, has been also quantified through long-term analysis of satellite photos from the 1980s comparing through the 2000s, and it's a trend that's been seen all the way from Senegal over to Sudan throughout that whole Sahel belt. Now, the number of studies that I've seen that have looked at this trend have really attributed it to higher rainfall patterns that have also emerged over that period. Now, what you've talked about primarily here is changing in policies and changing in farmer practices, but we also have this other natural phenomenon going on. So how can you really identify the impacts between social changes and natural environmental changes that have been occurring at the same time?
Okay. Let's take Steve, and then we'll come back to the end. Sorry. Right here, Steve. Kenda.
Hi, I'm Steve Hagblade from Michigan State University. I have a comment and followed by a related question. And the comment is, I think it's helpful. You've talked about quite a number of different practices, and it's helpful to me at least to unbundle them a little bit. It seems to me the centerpiece of what we're after is to raise productivity of African farmers. And there are many different ways we can raise productivity. One of the things that you've talked about is reforestation. It's basically land reclamation. So that phase of your activities is raising productivity from zero up to something. Then the other activities you talk about, the zai planting pits and the stone buns, for example, and the leaf litter from these leguminous trees, those are aimed at raising productivity from something low to something higher. And I think it's important to note that there are a lot of ways to raise productivity. And one that hasn't come up, we've talked about the nitrogen coming down from the trees. The raising of the soil organic matter in the soil is very important. The increased soil biotic activity, and the early planting. One of the things that the zai technique allows you to do is to plant earlier with the first rains. When you do that, the soils are warm, you get a nitrogen flush in the soil because of what the soil bacteria react to this water. So if you plant with the first rains, you get a big bump in yield compared to somebody that plants late. If Chris plants on November 1st, and I plant on November 30th because I have to plow the fields and I can't do that till the rain comes, 30 days early, his yield is 30 to 60% higher than mine, just because he does his land preparation in the dry season and he can plant on time. So that's a huge productivity gain, and it didn't involve any external inputs. Now, so there are many ways to raise productivity. Fertilizer is a good thing to do after you've reclaimed the land, after you've built up the soil organic matter, and if you plant on time. And so my question for the panel is, I see a huge disparity when people talk about how can we raise productivity in Africa. Everybody is spending money on mineral fertilizers, hundreds of millions of dollars, even in small countries. And there's very little money being spent on the kinds of things that are required, very labor-intensive, management-intensive, to get farmers to adopt these kinds of natural resource management technologies. So my question is, how are we going to avoid wasting billions of dollars as donors who haven't been involved in agriculture now try to pour masses of money in? How can we get some balance in this effort to raise soil productivity? Because I do think Chris and Loranu are right that we need to do both, but right now we're completely forgetting the natural resource management side of the equation, and it's very dangerous if we don't increase the balance. So since you're on the front lines and you know how to redress this balance, I'd like to hear how you propose we go about it.
Panelists, we have heard from 3. I know there's one hand at the back. If you allow me, let's take that one hand, and then we come back to all of you. Sir?
Thanks. My name is Greg Vaughn. I'll make this quick. I'm an academic professional from Tunja, Colombia. I wanted to know, kind of building on our first 2 questions in this round, have there been any studies done to really quantify or make tangible any increases in revenue for family farmers on a per-farm basis, as opposed to just these satellite images of greening of the Sahel? And if not, are there any plans to do so, and how could we try and really see if not only the land is getting greener, but people's pockets are getting greener too?
Mm-hmm. And I have a question not for our panelists here, but for Mr. Sawadogo and Madame Sakina. What inspired you to think of these traditional techniques? Why or how did you come to those when everybody else was going away from them? Thank you. Why don't we begin with the panelists and then come back to Mr. Sawadogo and Madame Sakina? Yeah. Which way do you want to begin, Matthew, Chris?
We agreed that Lavanu would begin with the most difficult question.
Okay,
I would
this is
take the easiest.
Telepathy works. Lavanu?
We really thank everybody for their various contributions and the issue raised. To start responding to the on soil fertility. If soil fertility if soil fertility was monitored with time, I think that a lot of studies that have been conducted by our colleague, the soil scientists. Okay. Yeah, okay. So a lot of scientists have worked on monitoring the soil fertility, especially in our university and at the research institutes. And it showed that with all these investments, like the increase in number of tree species, the water conservation techniques that were really amended, increased a lot in terms of nutrient element content of the soils, and as well as the structure of the soil. Because I have a colleague who is monitoring this soil structure evolutions, where all this investment were carried out, and he really showed, and there are a lot of papers that were published, that there's really an improvement in terms of the structure of the soil. Because after for example, the drought of 1984 is only sand. There's barely nothing on the ground. So, but with the reconstitution of the vegetation, we start realizing that, in fact, the soil structures, well as the humus built up, is really improving. The yield increase, yes. This is your question, and somebody who, one of the colleagues who is asking about the productivity at household level. And we conducted a lot of studies on that, and the results showed that there is a tremendous increase in terms of agricultural production. That's clear. At farmers level, that's individual farmers level. But what really constrain this production to achieving food security, that farmers said they produce a lot. But the first challenge that I stated at the beginning of my presentation, that the increase of human population really compromise this impact. There are a lot of mouths. They say there are a lot of mouths to feed. So whatever you produce, and also the land is just diminishing. You have, let's say about 30 years back, you have in your family, you have 20 hectares. whereas you are almost 10% in that particular family. But now, 30 years after, almost you are 100, and everybody must have a piece of land where he is going to cultivate. So, and its family is just increasing. So whatever you produce at in a land area, it may not really be enough with this obsolete nutrients to feed your own family. In fact, they said that they are increasing their production, but the fact that they have a lot of people to feed, that really is a challenge. Yeah, I think Chris Reij, you can just go on.
Thank you, Lavano. About the rainfall, the influence of the rainfall. That's the easy question. What happened is that rainfall in the Sahel began increasing in the second half of around the middle of the 1990s. Before that, it was still very, very irregular and low. And rainfall has never restored to the old level of the 1960s. But of course, increased rainfall does have a positive impact on natural regeneration. It does facilitate natural regeneration. Gray Tappen, our remote sensing specialist from the United States Geological Survey, he did a study. He made a transect from southern Niger into northern Nigeria. And on both sides of the soils, the conditions are fairly similar, in the sense that you have Hausa on both sides, you have the same population densities, you have the same soils. Rainfall, however, increases when you go into northern Nigeria. Now, interestingly, that if rainfall would be the determining factor for regreening, then there should be more trees on farm in northern Nigeria than in southern Niger. But what we found, to our big surprise, is that there are many more trees in southern Niger than in northern Nigeria. So we cannot draw the conclusion that rainfall does not play a role, but human management is a more determining factor than rainfall for whether you will have regreening or not. Now,
oh,
hey, Gray. Yes, we see you.
Oh, well, Gray.
Gray is our big support.
Why don't we get a mic to Gray, and afterwards he can also amplify on your points. But in the meantime, does Mathieu want to say anything?
Mathieu can treat the point without the impact on income.
Okay.
And I don't know, one of us could handle the question by Steve about, which is essentially how can we avoid wasting billions of dollars, which will go to mineral fertilizers.
Why don't we address those two then?
Yes, I'll be happy to address.
I think this question may be thrown on the floor, and anybody who can contribute is highly welcome.
Yes, but let's first start with make sure we hear Mathieu, and then we come to Gray, and then our two leaders.
Bon, je m'excuse, ce que je vais dire, il n'y a pas de chiffres qui l'appuient. Ce que je veux dire est basé beaucoup plus sur le témoignage de ceux même qui pratiquent l'activité, qui bénéficient les impacts réels de ces activités-là. Nous pouvons... Ok. Nous avons fait une étude en 2000-2002 dans un certain nombre de villages qui ont prouvé qu'à l'ère actuelle, ils se considèrent moins pauvres qu'il y a, par exemple, 25 ans passés. Et les indicateurs qu'ils utilisent, c'est en termes de moyens de déplacement. Par exemple, il y a 2000, par exemple en 80, à aujourd'hui, ils considèrent que le nombre de moyens de déplacement en mobilette ou en vélo s'est multiplié et presque dans chaque famille, il y a suffisamment de moyens de déplacement pour chaque membre de famille. Et la plupart des nombres de maisons semi-dures a augmenté. Bon, en tout cas, même en nombre de femmes. Alors, donc, pour dire que, alors, même ceux qui mangent à leur faim ont augmenté. Il y a des périodes déterminées. Il y en a qui, en 80, ne pouvaient pas manger au moins 8 mois de l'année. Et aujourd'hui, ces gens mangent les 12 mois de l'année et qu'il y a des reliquats des récoltes précédentes. Donc, pour nous, ça, c'est des indicateurs réels des bénéfices. Mais malheureusement, nous n'avons pas de chiffres qui appuient cela.
Chris,
I shall quickly summarize it. Fortunately, I know this particular case. But in 2002, a study was done, which was, by the way, co-funded by USAID, about long-term trends in agriculture and environment on the northern part of the Central Plateau. And in this particular study village, the situation was desperate in 1985. There was people fled the village, essentially. Soil and water conservation interventions began. Agroforestry systems were built up. And we tried to compare the situation between 1985 and in 2002. And according to their own criteria, many people had moved out of the poverty bracket. And they had become medium income farmers. And they had indicators, levels of mobility, levels of household food security, the way that the houses were constructed, the number of livestock owned and managed by each family. In 1985, only 2 families had cattle. Now all the 160 families have cattle, and they manage the cattle also more intensively and use the manure there, and they bring it back to the fields. In 1985, many families harvested only for 4 months a year, and the rest of the year they had to try to make both ends meet. Now many families in that village have food security the whole year, and several families have also constituted security stocks. There are even cases where security stocks will last for 3 years, which is something which is quite impressive. If you see how such a village has, let's say, moved up. And it's very simple to explain why this is the case. All know much better than I the studies by Irtz and Lin Lin in the Development Policy Review of 2001 about how agricultural productivity changes have an impact on rural poverty in Africa. And the 10% increase in agricultural production leads, according to them, to a reduction in rural poverty by 6 to 9%. Now, we find many examples of increases in agricultural production of 50% or even 100%. So that explains why many farmers now consider themselves to be less poor. We could even say that in many of these villages where natural resource management has been undertaken, that the Millennium Development Goal has been achieved.
Thank you.
For reducing acute poverty.
We have 5 minutes. I want to give a minute to Gray Tapan, who walked in, if he wants to add any, and then I would like to come back to Mr. Yacouba and Madame Sakina and Edwige. Yeah. So
I guess I don't have any specific points to add. Not having been here earlier, I think I might be.
Can you speak into the mic? Yeah, into the mic. It's fine.
It's on?
Yeah.
Yeah. Nothing specific. I'm sure my colleagues can cover it. So thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. Edwige, a short comment, and then.
C'est pour juste appuyer le commentaire que vient de faire Chris. Par exemple, on a montré à partir de nos études de capitalisation au Burkina, Niger, que sur 1 hectare de terre dégradée, on augmente en moyenne de 200 kilos la production agricole. Et ça, c'est la ration alimentaire d'un Sahélien pour au moins 200 jours. On a allé même, les économistes qu'on a associés à ces études de capitalisation, ils sont même allés jusqu'à montrer la rentabilité économique de toutes ces technologies de GRN. Et ça va de 15 à plus de 80% de rentabilité économique. Donc il y a quand même des chiffres qui sont dans nos différents documents qui peuvent être consultés.
What Edwige Botoni said is that the studies that were recently undertaken in the Sahel showed that average yield increases of 200 kilos a hectare or more, and 200 kilos is the food ration for one Sahelian in the family. And studies by economists on internal rates of returns to investments showed internal rates of return which ranged from 15% to even 85%, depending on the techniques that we were talking about.
Okay. Melinda?
It just might be worth adding.
The microphone right next to you.
Edwige is the coordinator of the studies being conducted in the Sahel from these techniques.
Okay. And now we give the floor to Mr. Yacouba with the help of Mr. Bitienga. Thank you so much, sir. It's on. It's on.
It's on.
Just speak into it.
Okay, I will ask the question in his language. He will reply and I will make the translation.
Thank you.
Yes, in English, Yacouba, what drove you to do what you did. Sigon wana tiambwa tum ning fantaram gomdun no.
Tum da singla zamana wankingi tineba fanzo tin tulumse kidi.
I started this technique, this agricultural technique, when it was very difficult to live in my village. Everything was very difficult, and many people left, but I decided to stay.
Titisa fan kibu, bati tenganga ayape lu tubanutudi.
The land became too poor to produce cereal for all the families. This is why people left, but I decided to stay.
Ya ye pogon lama mankia na man yu mata timbebe ngiligidi bawde tumde ning hanna ton tum tenganga liba pam ti semele bin lebe ti neba me henju ya ti perde lebe ko wa.
I spent 3 years in the bush reflecting to find a technique to improve the land, and I found what we call today in my language Zai.
Ene tumda lunda zamana fa sidwatamu ndati tumda mbange wata wa kalundo tumda me anafa zamana anafa mam anafa zamana lene tonde patar koyge.
This technique has been used by many farmers in my village and in other villages in Burkina Faso and in other countries. That means this technique can help everybody to improve the agricultural production. And now I am traveling in other villages teaching farmers how to use this technique.
Tumde se naf ton naf wenam tenganga sin kel fana nafa ene ton bon hombale ne da fa song to solo yi sobedle to ton song zamana fa gilli.
He believes in this technique, and what he expects from the donors is to give more support, because with this technique it is possible to combat poverty in the Sahel. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Madame Sakina.
Madame Sakina, tambayar da mutane ke mulki wai mine ne ya saku kuka kama mine ne ya saku kama wannan ne aiki har kuka kai ga cimma gurinku. Sakina, what drove you to do what you have done?
Kenan wannan aiki abin da ya samu ka kama shi don mu samu ragen hamada.
We started this work in order to reduce the effect of wind, that is hamada, that's Sahara Desert.
Kenan mu samu abincin da za mu ci da iyalinmu.
And also to get what we can feed our families.
Na uku mu samu abinci ga bisashenmu.
And also for our animals.
Na hudu shine mu samu itace da na saidawa da na abin da za mu toya gidajenmu.
And also to get firewood that we can use in our houses, and also get some extra to sell and get some income.
Yanzu sai mu nemi ilimi.
And now what remains is just capacity building in terms of education.
Da haka nan muka mai da hankali ga tattalin itace.
And we really continue to manage our trees.
Thank you very much. Hopefully are able to take up Chris's call and Matthias' call to scale up and multiply these successes and inspire others. And what can I say but thank you very much for taking the time to join us. And I hope that you are inspired and to share further.